Guys, I'm back. Elle here. I missed you guys. It's been a little while since I made a video. Yeah, shit's been crazy. You know, fucking life gets nuts. Anyway, I want to make a video today, or really what I want to do is make a whole series of videos about Norse paganism. I have had so many requests from people asking me, especially since I showed you guys my Norse pagan altar, to talk more about Norse paganism. And when I first started getting the requests, I was like, yeah, you know, maybe we'll talk about that later. I have a whole slew of things I want to talk about first, but you know, the more requests I got, I really started looking into it. And at first I was thinking that, you know, there's just so much information out there already. Is it really something that I need to add my voice to? And there's lots of websites, there's tons of books. But I poked around YouTube a little bit to see what was really out there on YouTube anyway. And I found a lot of stuff that, you know, is really more from a seeker's perspective, like a beginner's perspective. And I found a lot of videos that were, dude, they were like fucking racist and homophobic. I was like, oh God, this is painful to listen to. So I realized, yeah, it's definitely something I do want to talk about. And I want to start today. I'm going to try and put all the Norse and the runes and all those kind of themed videos into a playlist. I've been doing that with all the other videos that sort of belong together too. So check that out in the channel under playlists. What I want to try and do really with this kind of stuff is today I'm just going to talk about some thoughts on Norse paganism, just random stuff sort of in this video. And then what I'd like to do after this is create a series, short videos. I'm going to try and keep it concise. And that's why I'm not going to try and talk about like everything in one video. My videos get fucking ridiculously long, and then I try to edit them like really good to make them shorter, and then they just feel really choppy. I know, I'm working on it, guys. But yeah, what I want to do in the future is pick one small subject, like maybe we'll pick a god, and I'll just talk about how I view that god. One myth, one story, one subject, talk about orlog, talk about wyrd, you know, it's stuff like that, ideas or gods or whatever, and practices, definitely practices, and just do a quick like 10-15 minute talk about how I do those things or how I view those things. I'm not really going to talk too much about, because I had a lot of requests for this too, to just talk about, you know, how to get started or the basics or something like that. And you'll see as we talk about this, my own personal path is my own personal path, and that's really all that I can speak to. And that's what I'm going to share with you guys, how I interpret the myths, literally how I interpret the metaphor of the myths, how I view Norse paganism in relation to, you know, other mythologies, other religions, how they interact, how they're sort of the same thing. Yeah, so there's that. That's the plan. So back to the whole sort of idea of all the racism that I was coming across in the Norse path. A lot of people like to talk about how you have to have some sort of a blood connection or some sort of a lineage in order to be Norse pagan. I sort of wish that I was like Chinese or something right now and could say that I am a follower of the Norse path and I have no connection lineage-wise to the Norse, Germanic, anglo-saxon history and culture. But I do. So on my mother's side, we're straight out of Germany from my grandfather. But also on that side, my grandmother is Jewish, and there's a whole Jewish history there. My father's side is Russian and Christian. There's even Christianity on the other side, on the Germanic side, of course. But anyway, I am sort of a mishmash. I think that's where the world is headed, right? We're all becoming, you know, one people, one race, the more we intermix. So I don't know. I think the whole idea that you actually have to have some sort of a connection is absolutely ridiculous. You know, when the gods created the world and when they created humanity, they didn't just create, you know, Iceland or Germany. They didn't just create the Germanic peoples, you know, they created the world and all of humanity. So that's how I like to look at it. Now, that being said, maybe I was drawn to it because I do have a familial connection. And I think especially in Norse paganism, there is this big sort of idea, like recognizing and getting guidance from your ancestors is a huge part of the practice. Is just a big part of it. So I get that, you know, some people say you have to have some sort of a lineage, but I think that it's utterly ridiculous in today's day and age. And I even heard a lot of homophobic stuff, like you can't be gay or lesbian, or transgender, or I don't know where the fuck that shit comes from. So yeah, just, you know, ignore that shit is my advice. Especially, you know, if you're a solitary practitioner. I am going to be referencing this book I just picked up recently, my latest Northern tradition book, in this video. There's a lot of really cool stuff in it, and I think it's a great place to start if you are looking to get some information and get started. I'm definitely going to make a video, if not today, really soon, with just a bunch of book recommendations, places to get started. A lot of people have asked for that too. But yeah, sort of this idea of you know, having to have those blood ties that I think are ridiculous, sort of leads me into the next thing I'd like to talk about, which is all the different paths in the northern tradition, and I'm not just talking about like anglo-saxon or proto-Germanic or Norse, Icelandic, you know, whatever. Yes, there's so many different paths and things that fall under this heading. So I find myself really not drawn to any type of reconstructionist path. I personally feel like we live in a modern world. I have no desire to dress up like a Viking. I have no desire to I don't know, practice things exactly how they were practiced historically, you know? I think knowing the history of the people who practiced my religion, my spirituality, yes, totally important. I love studying the history of Vikings and all the peoples that came before. I honestly think that by the time we get to the Vikings in history and Viking culture and all that, I think that the people were even starting, for the most part, had sort of forgotten already the deeper truths and the deeper meanings of their own religion, for lack of a better term. Oh my God, I feel like I'm gonna be crucified for some of the things I'm saying. You know, I think we live in a modern world. Like I've said, I feel like I'm more of a neo-pagan, a neo-Norse pagan, something like that, maybe. Yeah, I've heard it called, you know, Reconstructionist derived, and this all comes from forums and books and things. You'll hear these terms thrown around a lot. It's the other one, unverified personal gnosis, right? You'll see that UPG all over the damn place, and that has to do with just, you know, your own experience, more defining what you believe and what you think the gods are, based on your own personal experience, not necessarily things that are written in the lore. So it's not that I don't have any interest in history, it's that I have very little interest in trying to recreate things exactly as they were. You know, I have no desire to sit in a high seat and divine for the town. You know, we don't live in that kind of a world anymore. It's sort of related to that, maybe even that, like the, you know, some people think that you have to recreate the things as they were in order not to lose this old path. Like the gods are somehow going to die if they're not thought of in the same way, if they're not worshipped in the same way. That idea just doesn't make sense to me. The gods have always been there, always will be there. Yeah. So this unverified personal gnosis, I guess it's something I do. My table is so squeaky, sorry. It's something that I do, I guess, work with in a way. Although I do, most of what I believe comes right out of the lore. And you'll see as we go through the videos and I explain things in much, much greater detail. I just want to touch on some confusing ideas maybe in this video. But yeah, the gods aren't, they ain't going anywhere. I do look at some of the gods as, personifications of forces, natural forces. Some of them embody in planet, but that doesn't make them something fake, that doesn't mean they're not the gods we read about. It's their consciousness still. Everything is consciousness. I also hear a lot of times people talking about how like the Norse pantheon is completely separate and divorced from any other pantheon. So like it's almost, they have this idea that they recognize the other pantheons. Some people look at it that way. Some people give absolutely no credit to the other pantheons. Say what you people believe is wrong, what I believe is right. It's such a silly way to look at things, I think. Like I said, it's every single religion, every spirituality, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all included, and all the pagan paths and mythologies and Hinduism, like fucking everything. It's all exactly the same as far as I'm concerned. I look at it like, Thor and Zeus or Jupiter in a lot of ways are the same force. When you read about them, most of the time they're talking about the same thing. And the same with Freyja, and this, there's all these correspondences in every single mythology. And the same ideas you see expressed. Joseph Campbell talks about it in The Hero's Journey. It's the same steps that in all our hero mythology, Jesus and Buddha, Sigurd, it's all the same paths, it's all the same steps. Beautifully illustrated by Joseph Campbell, and he talks about, I'm just using him, it's a belief that I have, but he was the first one that really helped me understand. Now, he doesn't take it as deep and to as much of a spiritual place as I think I'm gonna go in these videos, but it was a great starting place for me to understand that connection. Also on that subject, I think that what we have that remains from all the different northern traditions, what has made its way down to us is a small, tiny fraction of what existed then. The lore is so spotty, and it's even a conglomerate of all sorts of different peoples, sort of has come together into this one mythology. So you do have like a million different names for a lot of the same gods. There's so many different names for the earth goddess, and I think a lot of that is because it comes from all these different peoples, and it's all merged together. But yeah, it's spotty, and what I've done anyway, and this is what I get shit for from other people, not just online but in person, is utilizing other cultures, other mythologies, other spiritual paths, other religions, to fill in the gaps, because they're all talking about the same thing. Hinduism especially has come down to us, still being practiced throughout the ages. They have words for things that we just don't have words for. So it's a great place to look to for missing information. And the same with any other mythology. I like to expand upon and deepen my understanding of my gods through other gods, other myths, other places. And you'll see that again as I go through what we're going to talk about. So yeah, like I said, there was a time when I didn't think I was going to be much of a solitary practitioner. I wanted a group to practice with when I was younger. And I always was so welcomed, no matter what my beliefs, by general pagan groups, neo-pagan groups. And I loved that. But any time that I tried to, and it's sad, it really is sad, because I know there's so many people out there who are so welcoming. But what I found was that, when I tried to talk about how I interpret the myths, how I look at my path, they just, I don't know if it's that they didn't get it, didn't want to hear it. They had their own ways of looking at the gods, and if you didn't agree, it was like, yeah, that's just wrong, is what I got a lot. Now, that being said, also, I think that there are I've always looked at it as there's 3 different ways to practice your religion or your spirituality. And I loved finding it in this book, actually. They talked about it in 6 different ways. They pulled from another book, I forget the name of it, where the author talked about 6 different ways that people practice. I think in that book specifically they were talking about how people practice Christianity, but the authors Galina Kraskova and Raven Caldera turned it into more of like a pagan idea. I'm going to give you my 3. This is my 3 ways of looking at it. And there's a lot of crossover, and there's all these different levels involved. But anyway, the first way would be looking to your religion, your spirituality, your pagan path, whatever the path may be, that you're drawn to or that you believe in, for ethical guidance, how to live your daily life. There may be a lot of superstition involved. These are the kinds of people that spirituality is not the goal of their life, they're not going to be practicing shamanic journeying, probably not divination. They want to live a good life, and spirituality just isn't their focus. This would be like the going to church on Sunday kind of people. You go out of superstition, and you don't care to look deeper, and that's fine. That's where you're at. That's what you need. You get guidelines for how to live your life. It would be something like your 10 commandments. These guidelines how to live your life ethically, things to do, things not to do. In the Norse path, of course, you have your 9 noble virtues. By the way, this is something we're going to talk about again when we talk about Havamal, the words of the High One. It's literally split. I think this is where I get the idea, actually, that there's 3 different ways of coming at practice. The Havamal is split into 3 very distinct styles, 3 very distinct messages. And the first part, I think it goes up to verse, 111, I believe, talking about, simple remedies for a hangover, behavioral guidelines, things like that. So yeah, that's the first way of practice. And I find a lot of Norse pagans do fall into these first 2 categories anyway. A lot of people matter if they're Norse pagans. The second way would have a lot more practice involved. You start to develop a connection with with deity, you practice ritual, you might start to practice divination. If that's your thing, it doesn't really matter what it is. You know, devotional work, there's just a bit more of a personal connection there. And you'll see in comparison to the third path, which would be more of a life completely devoted. You know, I'm not saying go off and live in an ashram. You can do this in your life, but just more devoted to spiritual evolution. And this is where some sort of shamanic practice, meditation, all these kind of things, you know, you're actually journeying to these other worlds and having direct interaction, maybe on the astral, whatever it is. And looking at your mythology even on a different level, on a deeper level.
Hello, sweetie.
That was my phone. What else do I want to talk about? Okay. I consider myself a Norse pagan. I also consider myself asatru and heathen. I love all those words. According to some, they are very specific things in order to call yourself that. But yeah, whatever. I like, they're all sort of, for me, terms for the same idea. In public, I like to use sometimes Norse pagan, depending on who I'm talking to. I think there is more and more understanding of what it is to be pagan out there. In the past, it's really not something I would have brought up in everyday conversation because there were all these connections with like devil worship and you'd get all these like crazy reactions. But at the same time, I wanted to further people's understanding, you know, so I would bring it up as often as possible and make it okay. Look what's happened in the gay community now because we stood up and because we came out and talked about what and who we are, you know. Now it's not a weird thing, it's not misunderstood. Well, I don't go that far, but we're on the right path, you know. We can get married, fucking yay. And the same thing is true of all these alternative religions. You know, I think we have to bring it out into public awareness and talk about it so they have a face to put with it. Oh, you're a normal person and you're a pagan. Oh, sidetrack there, sorry. So Norse specifically, I don't think there's any criteria really for you to call yourself a Norse pagan. I know a lot of people, I'm gonna use Kellyanne Maddox actually as a reference for a second. I know a lot of us watch her videos and love her videos, and she's talked about, or she calls herself, right, like a chaos witch. Sorry if I get any of this wrong. And I know she's done like altar tours, right? And she's spoken about it a few times. I don't know if she'd call it her matron deity, but one of the deities that she works with is Hel or Hela, who is a Norse goddess, you know. But yet I don't think she could call herself a Norse pagan. Sure, why not? But I don't think that she necessarily identifies that way, even though, you know, she uses a specific Norse deity in her practice. And I think a lot of pagans are very sort of universalist like that. You know, they'll take from here, they'll take from there. They're very eclectic. Also, side note, I don't think, I've heard this on YouTube so much and it really like, it bothers me when people say that someone who is eclectic is just missing out in some way, like they don't fully understand where they're taking things from. Like you can't fully understand a system unless you are completely immersed in it, and that is the only thing you study. Bullshit. I think studying a lot of different things helps you understand the universality of all of it, you know? And I'm not saying that doesn't happen when people pick and choose from different things and just end up with this mishmash that makes no sense to them. I am saying that people who are eclectic in their spirituality aren't lacking necessarily in any depth and any understanding of what it is that they're doing. That's silly. But yeah, there's so many different ways to use, especially in this modern eclectic pagan world, to pick and choose, you know. The reason that I call myself a Norse pagan is because it's the entire cosmology that I am drawn to. The first time I read the Poetic Edda, I just cried. It was so fucking beautiful, and I felt so drawn to it. Before that, I found it when I was a teenager, but before that, I was studying Greek mythology and Hinduism and was fascinated by everything that I found there. Wicca, everything. It was all interesting, and I felt drawn to all of it. But the specific vocabulary even that they used, the shamanic sort of ideas that they talked about. Before that, I had this idea in my head of like Thor from Marvel Comics and like Odin as this, whatever. Which is just silly, but I don't know. I was drawn to the whole thing. And now, for all the gods, I use the Norse terms. For as much cosmology and as much spiritual understanding and the path and everything, it's all comes from there. Yes, I will learn more about it. And there's lots of things, like I said, there's so much that has been lost over the years. I'll fill in the gaps with theosophy and wherever I find the information. I think the Norse northern tradition on whole is really so interesting. A lot of the Icelandic stuff has survived because it was so isolated. But also it was an oral tradition for so many years. I believe that the Norse stories, the Norse myths, are just as ancient, just as archaic as Hinduism, as Egyptian myth, maybe. They all have this same ancient, archaic source. I believe that 100%. What we have today comes from so much later on because it was written down so much later. It was an oral tradition. It wasn't written down. There's a lot of things that are missing. And a lot of things have been Christianized. You find that especially in like the Greek myths and all sorts of stuff. The Christianity comes in and so much of our wonderful pagan lore and pagan history is just destroyed and lost forever. So yeah, there's a lot of filling in the gaps. I do not think that you can have truly complete view, a truly complete practice just from what we have left over. The bulk of it, yes, absolutely. There is so much wisdom packed into those, the prose Edda and the poetic Edda, and all the sagas that have come down, all these heroes' journeys. Yeah, there's a lot. There's an awful lot. There's so much fucking wisdom and power in the runes that have survived. Yeah, most of it's there, as far as I'm concerned. Again, this is just how I look at things. You can disagree, you can change the fucking channel if you really disagree. But I have a lot of people ask, how I practice and what I believe, and I think it's fun to share. I like hearing other people's opinions and viewpoints, especially on this kind of stuff, because it really isn't. It isn't talked about that much. I do want to put maybe a little disclaimer here and now. At some point, I'd like to do a video on ritual work and ritual practice. It has been a long time, however, since I've really done ritual. I have another video up about, it's part of the pagan challenge, the YouTube pagan challenge, talking about your daily practice and what practices you do, on some sort of a regular basis. I'll put a link to that video down below. I talk about what practices I really do have. What do you call it? Prayer work with prayer beads and malas and chanting and things like that. Actually, I found that in this book, which was really cool because it isn't something that is necessarily Nordic in origin. Not at all, really, as far as we know. But it is a practice that I have and I've turned into something Germanic or Nordic, whatever you want to call it. And they give some really great ideas in this book, if that is a practice you are looking to get into. I talk about that. I talk about astral projection and runes and tarot and all that kind of stuff. That is definitely part of my practice. And ritual used to be a lot, so it's something I can totally speak to, and we'll eventually get to it. But yeah, when I go over the book recommendations, there's a lot of information on how to set up your own altar, how to set up your own ritual practice in a group or on your own. Tweak things, take what you want, throw away the rest. Throw away the rest. Wow, I had a lisp there for a second. Take what you want and throw away the rest, you know, my eternal advice. So yeah, I won't really be talking too much, at least anytime soon, really about that. What I want to do is really talk about deciphering the metaphor in the myth, in the Eddas, and how I do that. And that is not to say that I fucking understand everything. Far from it. There is a lot that is still a mystery to me. And a lot of what I have sort of interpreted for myself may not resonate with you. It may not feel the same. It may not feel true. And that's fine. A lot of what I read in other books doesn't feel like truth to me. What I'm going to share with you feels like truth for me. It makes sense for where I'm at spiritually, evolutionarily. That's so not a word. For where I'm at, this works for me. Yeah, it's really very personal, but I think that's part of the work that we have to do as pagans, especially Norse pagans. You know, we have this lore that is so original. It's in poetic form. One of the things I love about the Poetic Edda is that it is in poetic form. It reminds you that it's all metaphor, you know? I think the problem with a lot of Norse pagans and how they would explain the path to you is that they're sort of come at things like a fundamentalist Christian. You know, they'll look at these words and almost take them as law, take them verbatim, as if the gods are some play taking place up in the clouds. You find this in all mythologies, right? There's like incest, like all this weird fucking shit happening. And it leads people to these sort of strange discussions. I just listened to one, and I do love this YouTube channel. They have Northern Runes Radio. I don't think that's the name of the YouTube channel, but it's a podcast, basically. And I love listening to it because they talk about things that I'm interested in, right? They talk about the gods, they talk about the lore, they talk about practice. Find them if you're interested. It really is cool. But I just listened to one recently about, it was all about Odin. And they talked about, you know, whether or not he is a trustworthy god. They made reference to the fact that Odin slays Ymir to create the world, right? They're like, wait, but he slew a kinsman. He killed a kinsman. This is against, you know, our own ethics. And the whole thing just seems so superfluous because you're not looking at the metaphor. You know, it's all written in metaphor. It's poetry. It's fucking pagan poetry. And I'm gonna give you what is really going on, and what I think is really going on from here on out, and all these Norse pagan topics, you know, and all the lore. But yeah, I think that that's a big problem, and I think that I'm hoping that, you know, maybe the way that I talked about tarot in a lot of other videos, that's what you guys are actually looking for, is a different take on things. Maybe at some point, like I said, I'll do a basic sort of an intro that you find in every book, but you find it in every book. And the very next thing I'm going to do here right now is give you guys some book recommendations, where to start. But that'll be the next video. So yeah, here we go. A whole new little journey we're about to undertake on this channel. I'm excited to talk about it. It's such a beautiful and wonderful topic. So stay tuned. Lots more to come. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.